Hey, we got the victory wings flapping. We're back this week. Rice football, blue and gray preview show. I'm Matthew Bartlett, sitting in a rather boring fashion. This is JP Heath rocking the wings after a Rice win over Louisiana Tech. We're here to talk a Rice game against Charlotte this weekend. See if they can keep that undefeated home streak alive. But before we do, JP, as we do every week, we let you cheat. We let you go back and talk about last weekend for just a little bit. How are we feeling with the overtime win? Has your heart rate recovered a couple days after the fact?
It has. And that was one of the most bizarre games. I forget who I texted what. You're clumped in that very tight knit texting group that it's hard to be upset. You're never upset about a win, but it was not a pretty win by any means at the beginning. But it was like the start to a really bad movie. Like I think maybe the worst movie I've ever seen was Dude, Where's My Car? Okay, I walked out. I'm not a guy that walks out on movies. The best movie I've ever seen, if you've known me for 5 minutes, is The Shawshank Redemption. I've got a Red and Andy poster off the site here. I haven't put up yet, but it was like, Dude, Where's My Car at the start, and then Red and Andy sitting by the rock wall towards the end, where you can't wait to see what happens next, because they flipped on a dime, and I'm glad they did. I'm reading Jerry Palm today, and he's got us going out to Hawaii for the Hawaii Bowl. I don't know if you saw that yet, but it's a great time to be a Rice Owl, and the way they're winning games is refreshing. They haven't had a clean sweep of these close games, so that's 4 straight games coming down to the wire. And my goodness, I think Medea would say it's just I know I can take more of those, but I just don't want those to be that close towards the end. It's just a fantastic ending that it could have been very downtrodden coming here if somehow Trey Harris made another miraculous catch at the end of the game, but the throw is just a little bit too long.
Yeah, he would have had to been about 14 foot tall to hold on to that one. And thankfully, he's not. Rice survives, moves on, picks up that overtime win, which was good, which was fun, exciting. And now we're back at the grind to talk about Charlotte this coming week, which I think it's interesting that, the schedule's been kind of put out rather well, I think, for Rice. You had a couple of the really tough games up front, and then you had 2 teams struggling in the records that are going to kind of pose similar threats, I think, on offense, at least from what they have from a talent perspective and how they're going to attack you. So let's start with the Charlotte offense, because I think that's their bread and butter, no secret. We got Chris Reynolds, who, man, I think he got put on every preseason watch list when it comes to quarterbacks at this level. Experienced passer, him and Frank Harris at UTSA, probably the only 2 guys coming into the year that you could say were proven commodities at the quarterback position in this conference. And there's 11 teams in Conference USA, so that puts him in rare air. Well, this year at least, puts him in rare air to begin with. What do we know about Chris Reynolds and this offense that, Sans head coach? I think we should probably mention that off the top. Will Healy relieved of his duties last week. They got an interim man, but I think probably we know what we're going to expect. It's going to be the Chris Reynolds show again on Saturday.
Yeah, first part of that question, we know Chris Reynolds is really good, 3-time all-conference, and really hurt the Owls last year. You go back a little bit to that game, as we talked a little bit in the presser yesterday. Remember, that's the Ari Broussard 186-yard game at Charlotte. So hopefully that's an omen of some good things to come. But this Charlotte offense is still really good on the passing side. They don't run the ball too well, but Chris Reynolds, part of that passing offense, with 3 really good receivers. Hopefully not a Freudian slip there, but 3 really good receivers in Spencer, the reigning Conference USA Freshman of the Year, Dubose, and Tucker. They've got some miles on them. And Reynolds, really good shortstop in his high school days, you can see some of those baseball tendencies that I think, and Coach and I were talking about it on his show Monday night, Reynolds and TJ McMahon are similar in their makeup. Reynolds is a little bit shorter And I think McMahon's a little bit faster and leaner, but they're both similar type of gunslinging athletes. McMahon doesn't have the All-Conference USA pedigree that Reynolds does, but so a few more skins on the wall just from actual game reps. But we know recently nothing's too new for TJ, but he can go. And when you're never out of a game when you have a really good quarterback. And Chris Reynolds, as you said, maybe not one top dog in Conference USA, but he is in the top two, maybe the top two or three tops. He is up there. And when you get guys like that backed, and you get a team like this backed in a corner, that next game is always going to be their best game, maybe for the rest of the season. This is a wounded dog, and this is still an offense that has some talent on the quarterback and receiving end. So the Owls have to prep for that.
Yeah, you mentioned the gunslinger aspect. I found this interesting when I was doing my research for the game. Chris Reynolds is leading Conference USA in interceptions, which number 2 on that list is TJ McMahon at Rice. Yeah. So turnovers have been something that have been an issue for Rice this year, and has been something that I went back today. They've had one game where they played turnover-free football, and that was McNeese, and they won by 40 some odd points in that game. So obviously you gotta watch out for that. I think the Rice defense is going to be ready and looking forward to somebody who is going to take those risks, because I think we've seen that they can make them pay. But again, you had a high-flying passing offense last week against Louisiana Tech that managed to put up 41 points against you, almost 43. Had that last pass gotten a little bit lower, but it didn't. And I think it's interesting because you look at this matchup, it's going to be Chris Reynolds. They don't really have much of a running game. Shadrack Bird is back, and he's a pretty powerful threat on the return front. He's got some shiftiness and some explosiveness, but they're not really going to run the football. And it's going to be Reynolds and those 3 wide receivers, which is interesting because this offense almost looks like a carbon copy of the one that Rice saw last year. And for the most part, I thought they hung tough really until like the midpoint, that 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, where Charlotte goes down the field and they end up scoring, 17 of their 31 points in the final 6 minutes in overtime. So we've seen the high points. Anything else? We got Bordy up here. Who else other than kind of those guys we've hit on do we need to talk about on the offensive side?
Bird's a guy that came back on the the rushing side. I don't have the all the blanks filled in on Bordy just yet. Iowa transfer, so he comes in with some pedigree, but it's been all on Reynolds, and he's an old man out there. I say that in a complimentary sense. He's got some wisdom, so he's seen every type of defense. But with the consistent pressure Rice has been able to throw out this year, good gosh almighty, are they making quarterbacks go off schedule? They're doing very good at that. And I mentioned this triumvirate here: Tucker, Spencer, and Dubose. Dubose, a D2 guy. Tucker, as you and I were talking briefly before the presser yesterday. Again, pay no attention to these digits here, but this Tucker guy is a good one. And they don't use the tight end quite as much, and they've got 3 linemen that come back with some experience, but it's been very tough for the Charlotte team. And the thing is, when you look at their record, they played close in some games, but they just could not get it all together for one stretch. And you look back to last year, that was last year, right, where they beat Duke. And they just couldn't turn the corner after that and build it up. So there's still a lot of those guys left. Like Coach said to us, I think in both settings, his show and the presser, we've got a different cast of characters. Coach was saying they've got a lot of the same guys. So these are guys that have put together some good performances in the past. It just not much has gone right for them this season.
Yeah, and one thing when you go back and kind of, reverse scout on the box scores that you have to keep in mind with Charlotte is Chris Reynolds was hurt in the opener against FAU, and he missed several games, and they kind of went into a tails there. Lost to FCS, William and Mary in a game that was not very close. But as soon as he got back on the field a couple weeks ago, they kind of regained their mojo and the offense started clicking. And that's part of what makes them dangerous, what makes them interesting, is because when you have a guy at the helm that can make the throws and make the plays, if you get him on a good day and he's not turning the ball over, then you find yourselves in a Louisiana Tech situation where you can play pretty good defense, but he makes the right throws and points are going up on the board. So this is a game that, I haven't looked at the latest lines and such, but I know Rice was a multi-touchdown favorite when it opened. I think it's gone up a little bit. So this is a game where that's really your top concern. If you can keep Chris Reynolds and that passing game in check, I'm not even going to say stop them, but at least limit the damage. You got to feel pretty good across the board because this is a one-dimensional offense where you know exactly what they're going to do. And either you can stop it or you can't.
And 16.5 is what it is now.
Yeah, 16.5.
Which you're a great research guy. I generally, it seems like our becoming more and more. I can't talk much about it, but it is. I wonder the last time they were favored by this much on the road like that, at home. Excuse me. After being a road favorite, you told me last week the first time since 2019. But so yeah, they're finally coming along. In I guess a little more of the guys in the desert respect towards the blue and gray, but we don't pay attention to those things anymore.
Unfortunately, if we were paying attention, last week would have been the first week that Rice did not cover since USC. So 5-2 against the spread this year for Rice, for those who are keeping track of that point. And
if we even thought about that stuff.
Right. If we even thought about it. So kind of that's the offense. That's what this team is going to be. I think, and we talked with Bloomgren about this at the presser on Tuesday. All my days are flowing together.
Same.
The installation of the interim head coach, he's an offensive guy, but again, that kind of turned around on, I guess, Sunday, and he's kind of in the thick of things. So probably more than likely, given the personnel, given what we've seen from this team in the past, I think what you see is what you're going to get. So anything we need to talk about the interim situation over there, or do you think it is kind of a non-issue from a Rice perspective?
No, to me, it's always something worthy of talking about. One, to give us D2 guys some love. I love the small school route to doing things. I forget if it's Tucker. I think it's DeBose Tucker that had the worked at a Walmart and decided just, I'm gonna go play football again, and then he ends up being a 3,000-yard receiver. So I love stories like that. And Pete Rosamondo is the interim coach, 10 years of head coaching experience. So he's won about 60% of his games as a head coach. He was 5 years at Central Connecticut State, and then 5 years at New Haven. And just 10 years ago, what were you doing in 2012? It was my first year doing Rice. But he was the D2 National Coach of the Year, took them up to number 3 in the nation. So finalist for the FCS Coach of the Year, named for the great Eddie Robinson, and is a 1-year O-line coach at Vanderbilt and Rutgers, each of those, and then comes to the Queen City. So you got 2 O-line coaches going at it. Which is it going to be on brand? And this game ends in 2 hours and 45 minutes, or is this going to be a sling it around game? Well, of course, it's going to be a sling it around game because we already talked about Chris Reynolds and TJ McMahon and their sling gunner tendencies. So that's a little about Coach Rosamondo. But like I say again, wrapping it up, Coach Bloomgren said yesterday that the Owls have a lot of the different characters in this one, but Charlotte has most of the same cast of characters in this one. Doesn't necessarily mean anything specific to the output or outcome of the game, but those are the principles in this one.
Yeah, and one quick note on offense pertaining to Rice. Here's a little nugget you can stick on Bordy. Heck, he's probably already there. This weekend when TJ McMahon comes out and takes that first snap against Charlotte, he will have tied the longest streak of starts for a Rice quarterback under Bloomgren with 7. And he'll actually have the most consecutive appearances with 8 coming in against USC. So we've long awaited an answer at the quarterback position for the last several years. Maybe Dreyfus Jackson, maybe going back that far. And it looks like Rice has one. And I think it's interesting. Bloomgren mentioned the different cast of characters, and as a good thing, because at this point last year, Luke McCaffrey was playing quarterback, and off the field, he didn't start against Charlotte, if I'm getting my order correctly. I don't believe he played quarterback much at all. So now he is a Conference USA leading wide receiver. You got Brad Rosner back. The O-line looks different every single week, let alone how it did last year. The Rice offense has made a significant jump. I mean, just even points per game, it's probably, need to go pull the numbers, but getting much up there. So I think it's interesting. I think it's also like storyline wise, the fact that this was a game that Rice couldn't hold on to and lost in overtime last year, and then lo and behold, they sneak out an overtime win heading into this year, or into this game this year. I think that is kind of convenient how those two things have happened. So interesting for the matchup. And while we're talking about the Rice offense, you see what I did there? Professional transition. While we're talking about the Rice offense, let's flip over to that side of the ball and talk about how they match up against the 49ers defense. And to set the stage there, I want to read a couple numbers because I'm a numbers guy, like you mentioned. And I think this is pretty prescriptive of where Charlotte is as a defense. We kind of talked about Louisiana Tech last week and said, hey, if you're going to get the running game going at all this year, it has to be this week. Well, now fast forward and let's look at Charlotte. So scoring defense, and we're going to do a little comparison game. Charlotte first, then Rice. Scoring defense, Charlotte is 11th in Conference USA. There are 11 teams. Rice is 6th. Rushing defense, Charlotte is 10th. Rice has the 4th best rushing defense. Passing defense, Charlotte is 9th. Rice has the 3rd best passing defense in Conference USA. How about that? And then total defense, Charlotte 11th. Dead last, Rice number 2 total defense in Conference USA. So I know the game is not decided in the spreadsheets and the numbers, JP, but tell me why Rice should not be underestimating the Charlotte defense.
Well, short answer is because they're Division I athletes on the other side of the ball. But I think they're not in a, can I be blunt and say they're not in a position to overlook anybody? I don't think they're anywhere near what they should be on offense, what they could be, what we've seen in stretches. Coach Bloomgren, and I don't say that trying to be sarcastic. They just, they can't afford to do that. So I think their culture is now that they're not going to overlook somebody like that because they haven't put together back-to-back games. Heck, they haven't put together a lot of back-to-back halves, as we've talked about other shows. They just don't have that consistency. So, Coach always
to that end, I think it's worth noting they have yet to have a comfortable win over an FBS team this year.
Yeah, get out of my head. Coach was saying that we just signed off. No, he did say this on air, so I'm not speaking out of turn. I thought it would have been anyway, but he said, "Yeah, I just I want to go put someone away and just get some other guys in there. We haven't had a game like that, so yeah, they're that's why because they haven't done it yet, and they're capable of doing it. But let's put together a full game. Not that they were thinking this. We're just two knuckleheads here talking about things, but yeah. And the answer to the other one, Jake Constantine started that game against Charlotte last year. I looked that up.
There you go.
Talk about that earlier.
Yeah, that was I thought that was right. So
and
yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Not only the worst pass defense in Conference USA, but the worst total defense in the country too, and the worst pass efficiency defense in the country too. But that means nothing. As coach has always said, let's worry about us, not about them.
Means something to me.
Yeah, to us.
Can I say that?
Value
But I
you.
think it's interesting because last week we said, okay, Louisiana Tech had the worst run defense in Conference USA. I think were they 130 out of 131 in FBS or something like
They
that?
were the last
They were
rushing
dead
defense.
last.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So you played the worst rushing defense last week and ran for 275 some odd yards. I looked. It was actually in Chuck's notes. Great SID over here at Rice, filling us with all of our talking points, or at least most of them. Highest rushing total for Rice since the game against UTEP in 2017. So that was the game that you wanted to see. We had TJ McMahon have a couple 300-yard games earlier this year against, honestly, some pretty good defenses that have been kind of proven out over the course of the year. So you saw that this would be a great week for TJ as he kind of transitioned. And I was talking about this yesterday with offensive coordinator Marcus Tuiasosopo about TJ's transition from, you coming off the bench against USC, and even those first couple games as a starter, you're kind of the spark plug. You're the guy like, oh, he's the new guy. We come around, he's going to get us going. And that's not TJ's role anymore. He's just not the rah guy. He's the new life. He's the guy. And the kind of mental approach to being the starter at a D1 football program as TJ kind of takes that leap, this would be a great opportunity for him to kind of turn that into some points. So I think if we're just looking cast of characters on the other side of what McMahon's going to be looking at, we mentioned this is a defense that struggled. I think it's kind of instructive then that two of their top three tacklers, Wayne Jones, Solomon Rogers, are both out of the secondary. You got to look at linebacker Prince Bima across the middle as another guy who is going to be involved in a lot of plays, and getting to that second level, making them be the ones that make the tackle is going to be big. We haven't talked about him much, but Juma Ottaviano on track to get a huge workload, or at least a very big workload compared to the past in this game. Who are some other guys that we need to see or be aware of that they're going to be facing off against?
Marquise Watts was the first one that coach mentioned when I asked about the defense. Does not lead them in tackles by any means. You already mentioned those secondary numbers, but coach said Watts and Servin, 99% of the snaps, Watts is going to be on that side. And what that does is it gives them some different looks as far as the run fits to be able to try to take advantage of the passing game. But Watts is really good. He's their best defensive lineman. You see they rotate some guys. Morgan's a guy coming back. Mike Kelly's a guy coming back. And Prince Bima is there on the linebacking core. And again, pay no attention to the stats behind the curtain there. These are not accurate here, but just to give you a framework in my nerdy prep of this one, Boykins has filled in there too. So they are, as we've already mentioned, a defense that gives up a lot, but they've still got some talent out there on that side of the ball. And to not to one up Marcus Tuiasosopo stories, but when you were relaying that, I just got this memory of Coach Tui telling me that something I didn't know. Last year, TJ McMahon went to Coach Tui's office and said, I'm ready. Like, I'm ready. And to see where TJ has come from and to wait. I remember it was whenever TJ got here, it was, man, that JUCO kid from Cali. People would tell me off like on the sideline, he can throw. Like, he's got something to him. And what was that? 3 years later, for him to be fulfilling that, I love the long journeys and to see what TJ has gone through. I know this is generally centered on a Charlotte specific defense. And I gave you those little morsels there, but I had to say that because it's rewarding when you see that come to fruition because, Brother Bartlett, what do we talk about? As long as we've known each other, you recite all the quarterback stats to me, and gone is the stat almost completely of Sean Stankiewicz being the longest consecutive starting quarterback, right, under Coach Bloomgren, and it's TJ, and you just look at that run he had last week too. That was something. The longest rush of the season for the Owls came from their quarterback. They've got their guy. And let's see what it can turn into. Hopefully, a fruitful homecoming game on Saturday.
Yeah, it is interesting. You mentioned that as we kind of tie a bow on this one. You look at the cast of characters. We talked about it being different, but it is kind of a list of guys who fought through and stuck it out. You have Cam Montgomery and Juma Taviano in the backfield, two guys that last year, if you would have said that they didn't play this entire season or didn't get any carries, no one would have been shocked. They have been fourth, fifth options on the depth chart and hurt the past couple years. You had TJ McMahon, who, this is not super common in college football today, was brought in the same recruiting class as another quarterback who was the default. He was in the same class with Mike Collins, and it was, well, of course, Mike Collins is going to start over him, and TJ's just the guy. You got Brad Rosner, who thought through 2 years of injuries, Luke McCaffrey, who decided to stick it out and switch positions when, it's not really the common tract for a quarterback that doesn't get the job in college football these days. So this Rice offense, it's super interesting that you kind of mentioned it. It's guys who stuck around and taken the long road and now are back, and man, they're putting up points. We had 35 points after halftime last week. I would be thrilled to see another 30-plus point outing out of that group today. I'm getting ready. It's game day. It's game week. We're getting there. What else am I missing? What other tidbits do we need to know? Give me one last info bite about Charlotte before we wrap up and get out of here.
About Charlotte, can I say one thing on Juma while I think of that is...
I'll allow it.
I wrote down, I was looking at my notes. I don't write it word for word. You're the professional reporter and you record everything. I forget, it could have been me who I asked Juma about staying the course. Someone asked him about staying the course, and he said, some point I realized it's bigger than me. And that just encapsulated everything. And I had a great talk with Juma after things. There's been something I wanted to ask him for a couple years now about his high school coach, who we're not friends or anything, but I knew of him. He's a very eclectic character. When I knew of him doing radio in small town East Texas. So Juma, high school quarterback, and we've known what he's done and what he's battled through. He had ankle problems, and he just kept going, kept plugging away. He was huge in that win against UAB on special teams. And then he talked about how that got him going back in things. But Charlotte's not going to be a pushover in this one. There's your Charlotte nugget. This is a game where Rice needs to start fast and stay fast, and they can't let them up for air. If they are struggling, be interested to see if the Owls can put them away. And obviously, for the one or two people that watch this on rewatch or watching it live that don't know, I do the Rice game. So yes, I want Rice to win, but I want to see Rice have that killer instinct if the game is out there to put away, because like you have to learn how to win, you have to learn how to beat teams you should beat, and this is one that they should be able to win, but it's not going to be without some firepower from Charlotte. Chris Reynolds can put up some yards. I was looking at the box score. He threw for 294, 3 touchdowns, and 292, 3 touchdowns and no picks in last year's game. So ironically, in a game where Rice has the distinct advantage passing, I want to see more of that running. Give me more of Cam Montgomery, and let's see how Juma Ottaviano. Coach Bloomgren said it this week. I promise the last thing I'll say. He said, we thought we had 3 guys. It's just a different order now. and put Juma on the depth chart. So I think getting to see more of Juma, whether he's still 21 or gone back to number 8, that's going to be a cool thing. And I'd love to see Cam Montgomery get over the century mark too, as long as I'm just requesting things. So
yeah, if they let us ask, I will close us out with this one last tidbit. Rice 3-0 at home this year, have the opportunity to go to 4-0 with the homecoming win. Last 2 games coming up at home against UTEP, and then spicy ending the season at home with UTSA, their last home game. Last time Rice went 4-0 at home, 3-0 even at home. They went 6-0 and swept their home slate. So not that one game has predictive power for the whole future, but I'm just saying. So we'll see. We'll close out on that. We will be back next week to talk about UTEP and the Miners, last Conference USA football matchup with them before Rice departs and flies off towards the AAC. But until then, we are going to sign off. JP Heath, Rice Owl's voice on the call. As always, go listen to him. Go catch hopefully a boring, final seconds call this week where you can just say the whistle is over and Rice wins comfortably. And here, Matthew Bartlett, director of the Roost. We will catch y'all next week. Rice fight
never dies. Hoot, hoot. Hoot, hoot.